GDP numbers, but people are complaining. So there is this issue which I kind of alluded to, which is you cannot eat GDP. That is my rough way of answering it. So even we as economists, even as we kind of get excited about growth rates and charts and all that, at the end of the day, it is what do I take home? So there are two problems here. First, GDP is the income for all of us. All of us, the entire country. You know, we could say that this section are getting a lot of the share, the bigger share of the cake. And these other ones are not getting much. That is the first problem. Actually, COVID around the world has increased the inequities that we have seen in economies. So we are not talking just Kenya. I'm not talking of the COVID billionaires and millionaires. But I hope you can protect me, right? In all this, whatever I say here remains with us.
You are protected, Governor. Sema ukweli yote.
Thank you. So there are people that became very rich during COVID. But where were the others? Where were the others? There are people who lost their businesses, they got closed, etc. That's what you hear. So inequities, or should we say inequalities, have become larger, not less. And that is an important thing. When you think about inequities or inequalities, you also think about inequalities about opportunities. So for instance, when they say when I complain or you complain or somebody comes to you and complains, you know, they had a bill, as I said, of somebody. One of the most, I'm like you, yeah? You are an important member of our community. When all this was going on, how many people came to you asking for money to bury somebody? It wasn't one, I'm sure. And this is not the harambe that we always do. You know those harambes, right? No, it is because people needed, they were a serious need. And then you give your pickup, you do this, you do all those other things, because people are in serious need. A lot of you also did things like provide food, yeah? We talked about Kipchoge. He actually provided a whole bunch of the runners, because they were not getting any money and they had run out of money. He gave them something to sustain on. So that is what you hear. And I think it is important to appreciate that they are not wrong when they complain. It's only that maybe we get too focused on that bottom line and not realize that actually that number can hide a lot of other things that we need to deal with. So that's my rough answer, and I think you can see where we're going with that. You talked about China inflation. China, the problem is not inflation. The problem is growth. In China, they used to grow at 10%. Yeah, I remember when a few years ago, when we were working in a different life, 7% was sort of like their bottom line, sort of like minimum. Yeah, that's the floor. 7%. Where are they now? This year they'll be less than 5. I mean, if that is not an earthquake, I don't know what is. And this is all done by COVID. So inflation is not a problem there. But since the entire economy came to a crashing halt, their growth rate is the one that is now a big problem. And I don't know, they did have a big meeting recently, I think 2 days ago. I don't know what came out of it, but I'm curious to find out what they said about growth. But at the same time, China growth, they have a big issue, which is a bubble in the building industry. So they had been building all this, so the buildings, and mainly residential buildings, and they've just been growing like mushrooms everywhere, and banks were financing it. Now that whole growth model has come to a halt, and they have to deal with the weak banks that actually now cannot, that are sort of on the ropes, because of this sort of bubble, which will soon burst if they're not careful. So there are problems in China as well. And I think we have to learn, and I take your point, let's learn from everybody. and avoid those mistakes that maybe would be very expensive. So thank you for your points. The Mheshimiwa from Nakuru, I didn't get your name, but it's okay. You know, you make this point about women at, you know, the issues that you face, and I'm sure you have very detailed examples on this, high interest, etc. I think we are dealing with it in two ways. First is to make sure that the institutions that are lending according to risk, right? So for instance, the women that go to, you know, let's say a lady who has